to the planet of the Dakota boys.
You did that pretty well, even though.
Okay, yeah, well, tonight we are talking about War for the Planet of the Apes, which is a very long melodramatic title for what is a pretty great movie.
Is it, Steven?
It is. I'm just going to show my hand right away.
Let's examine why.
I'm going to just show my hand right away and say this movie is pretty great.
Yeah.
This is the culmination of a trilogy, and the end of this series of movies that started strong. I wouldn't say that started amazingly muscular, but started strong.
Okay.
The first movie, Rise of the Planet of the Apes, was a very well executed movie that actually I appreciate a lot more now after watching War. You go back and you see things connect all the way back to the beginning. Just with and I think it's because right away in Rise, they introduced you to not just Caesar, but some of these other apes that you continue to follow through the series, and you see all of their progressions together, for however long they're in the movies, whether without saying who or when, whether they make it into the third one or whatever, it's just like you see their progressions of character, which is interesting because I think if you're not totally familiar with these movies, these three movies are told from the point of view of the apes. Very much so by the time you get to the third one. The first one is 50-50. The second movie, I would say, is probably, 70-30? 70% ape, 30% human.
Yeah.
And the third one is basically all ape POV. You're just really with them in their quest, and so that's where War picks up. You're at this point where you're about 15 years after the events of Rise, I believe, about 15 years, and you see just how Caesar how he's leading his group and is really in this place of trying to build a civilization while at the same time have an army of sorts, although it's hard to say if you'd consider it an army since he doesn't really want to be at war, but he kind of is because there is this human military group that is seeking them out. So it's one of those things where his hand has been forced to protect the apes, and so this one starts right in the middle of a conflict, and I think what's really cool is each of these three movies starts with a hunt. The first movie starts with these men netting and capturing apes to be used in lab work. The second movie starts with the apes on a hunt for animals. And now this movie starts from these human military men moving through the jungle. And you're not quite sure what they're totally pursuing, although they're pursuing apes, because what's really cool is they had them do the writings on the back of the helmets, which I thought was a really interesting thing that military guys do a lot in movies and apparently real life, since they always do it in movies. Write things on their helmets like what they have, like monkey killer. One of them was something about Kong. I don't remember. And then a lot of them had the Alpha and Omega symbols, which was the name of their military unit.
I think it was the only good Kong is a dead Kong. Maybe?
Yeah, I think there was something like that.
Which is odd because there was a flip side. They had flipped that saying in the original movies, Planet of the Apes movies, where they said, yeah, the only good human is a dead human.
Yes, that's right, they did.
Spoken by, I believe, the ape leader of the military. So there's a lot of nods
A ton
in
of nods.
this movie to not just the first original Planet of the Apes movie, but some of the others.
Yeah.
And that really struck me as amazing because a lot of people try to act like the other Apes films don't count. Like, oh, just because they weren't up on par with the first one, they don't really count. And I thought it was really kind of showing, like, that's how strong the storytelling is. Like, yeah, it all matters. It all matters.
Yeah. Well, and honestly, when you think about the events that are happening in Rise, the first movie of this trilogy, is really what more or less happens in the fourth movie.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, that's just kind of interesting in and of itself. But also the fact the director of this movie, Matt Reeves, has said in interviews that Beneath Planet of the Apes is, I think, the one he saw the most because his family had it on film. Like, on film.
Whoa.
And he would watch it that way, and he just remembers, like as a kid watching scenes where those people, they take off and expose their true selves to the nuclear bomb, their mutant faces. And so I think you have this director who has an affinity for those sequels and sees that they're not, maybe they're campy and stuff, but there is some interesting stuff in them. And so I think it's cool that he nods to that and that they use the things that are interesting in different ways, And so it made it fun, but at the same time, this movie was fascinating because it was a really good standalone movie. I mean, obviously, it would pay dividends to have seen the first two, but this movie on its own is just a great piece of film. I don't know if you can still say film, and it's probably filmed digitally or recorded digitally, however you'd say it. But just in how they shot it, like shots they did, where it looked amazing, and then just the character development, the acting, and just all of it playing together. How there were scenes that relied on no dialogue, and as I mentioned in our Spider-Man episode, here 2 weeks in a row, you had Spider-Man: Homecoming come out, then the next week, War for the Planet, both composed by Michael Giacchino. Both in both those movies doing some of his best work. I would say War for the Planet of the Apes. If you haven't seen this, or if you did and didn't sit through the credits, I pity you, because about halfway through the credits, there's this really amazing song. The music of this movie I thought was just outstanding and really played to the story, and just enhanced this story they're telling of Caesar. And so really the gist of what's happening in this story is that there's this one military unit that is really hunting them down, that is led by this person that just keeps getting called the Colonel. And it's really just the story of when will they intersect and have to butt heads, because that's going to have to come and what that's going to mean. And what's interesting is their utilization of donkeys, that you have this army that goes out and is killing apes, trying to wipe them out before they are wiped out. And this military unit has apes helping them. They have apes carrying their guns, loading their big guns, carrying a bunch of stuff for them. They're basically like these slaves. They treat them like crap. They have the word donkey spray painted on them. And these apes are just doing it for them. And you find out part of it is that they were apes that weren't with Caesar, and so they're too ashamed to go back to him. But I don't know, you also wonder if going through, because you gotta remember the apes at this point are intelligent, and so are they thinking like maybe they'll be safe if they're with the humans? I don't know. There's just interesting ideas played in that, but that's what I feel like happens through this whole movie. There's a lot of interesting ideas played with just this idea of human nature. I don't know, when she said Dakota, like that was really the big thing in this movie. It was just that idea of human nature, really, would be the big thing. And what is human nature and just kind of those things. So I don't know, Dakota, what do you think what would be, like, without getting too spoilery, like some of the highlights of this movie for you?
Yes. Honestly, kind of the big one would be the apes themselves, the way they look, the way they move, their facial expressions. In anticipation for this, I kind of put in Rise of the Planet of the Apes, and the CGI in that is already kind of looking a little rough around the edges.
Yeah, not quite as polished.
Yeah. But in this movie, oh man, the apes look amazing.
Yeah, they look real.
Yeah. And it's just kind of off the top of my head, a few other things. Cinematography in this movie is just gorgeous. Like every single shot could be like a painting.
Yeah, this movie, it's just what from here this was created out of this series a lot of people consider campy, and you have this movie that every shot is like filmmaking.
Yeah.
And so I'd agree with you there. Anything else?
Let's see. Another thing. Sorry, I can't speak right now. Another thing I found really intriguing is also that these apes, rather than engaging the humans, are actually just trying to get away from them. And when I realized what they were really trying to do, I was like, it's interesting. Didn't anyone tell these apes this is war for the Planet of the Apes? So I was immediately kind of transfixed. I was glued to my seat, just waiting to see what would happen. With some movies you can already telegraph what's going to happen just by what you're seeing, what people are going to say. But with this one, you had no idea.
Yeah, you didn't know what was going to happen. And that is an interesting point, is that a lot of times we get these movies where you have this main person you're following, and they're like, I just want peace, I want peace. And then they go out and they're just like decapitating, stabbing people through faces, legs, whatever. But here you have your essential character truly does want peace. He wants nothing to do with fighting. He just wants to protect his kind, be left alone, and just live in peace. That's all he's about. And we don't want to go too far into this because you really just need to watch this movie. And that's where I really would push, is that this isn't just a movie for sci-fi nerds. I think this is a movie, and okay, yes, it's going to help if you see the other two. But I would say the other two are fascinating too. Dawn of the Planet of the Apes is one of my favorite movies of the past 5 years or whatever, and I still hold it in very high regard even after seeing this one. And so I mean, it's a great piece of cinema in its own right. It's just that you see this one didn't fall into the trap of third of the trilogy, becoming kind of weak in its final chapter, but really holding strong and finishing strong in what it did. And so, you really see the deeper development and the deeper struggle of Caesar's character in his fight to pursue what he wants to pursue. And on the flip side of that, we're introduced this character, the Colonel, played by Woody Harrelson, which shocked me. Woody Harrelson, I've seen other things where he's good or whatever, but I was blown away by how phenomenal he was in this movie, how well he worked, and how believable he was in a role that could have just been a chewing up the scenery role of overacting. He played it serious. And he played it not in the melodramatic way that he could have, but just a well done performance that really blew me away. That being said, this is another movie that I think is going to really cause people to say, where do you draw the line on what's considered a really good acting role? Because these apes were played by people who did all of the movements, all of the facial expressions, and then obviously a lot of very talented artists put a lot of great finishing touches to make it all work. But they were basing it off of real performances, so it makes you go, he did a pretty stinking good job in this. Do we nominate people who do motion capture? Now, I think Zoe Saldana, was she nominated for a Golden Globe? Is that right?
I believe so, yeah.
And so I guess that glass ceiling has been broken a little bit on the acting awards for motion capture work. But my goodness, I wouldn't be surprised if this brings that into the discussion even more. Just because I feel like Andy Serkis gives the performance of his career in this movie as of this point. And this is coming from someone, myself, that considers his character of Gollum very well done. But I think Caesar might be his master work. I don't know, what do you think?
Yeah, most definitely. It's kind of hard not to be memorized by his performance, especially in this movie where he's able to talk the way more like a human would. The only others that kind of did that stilted, kind of
relying a lot on sign language.
Yeah. And I thought it odd because in this movie, you see more of these apes who can talk actually do it. Because in a lot in Dawn, I know Koba was the only one that really kind of talked like Caesar did. Everyone else did sign language. But in this one, Maurice, who is in all three, does talk finally. And for me, he was the heart of the movie. Maurice was the orangutan.
Maurice has been the heart of the trilogy. He's been just a favorite of mine since the beginning. And if you really think about Maurice now from beginning to end, you realize that he really is the heart of it all. He is the Samwise Gamgee of this trilogy, where you realize it kind of comes back to him in a sense.
Yeah, but it's just interesting. As you see in the trailers, they find this human girl who, for which reason, is unable to talk. There's kind of a subplot here with, I don't know, we spoiling it with you. Apparently the simian flu virus that killed everybody, it's coming back to affect the survivors. And it's a very, very kind of intriguing nod to the first one that when it hits you, it's kind of like, oh, wow, that's intense. And then it immediately makes you question, well, who are you supporting in this whole thing, the apes or the humans?
That is the fascinating struggle through this series is in the first movie you're still kind of unsure about what's even happening, and then it starts to begin in the second one, and in this one you really find yourself there where you're like, wait a second, who am I rooting for in this?
Yeah.
And then partially you pull back and you go, it's just a movie. I'm just gonna like who I like. But it does open that door of just like, well, this is kind of weird. Who am I rooting for? Why am I rooting for them? What does this mean? What is the purpose of life? Go walk around for a few hours. No, I was kidding. No, that is fascinating. But that's where I find this another way where I think, just sci-fi can be used for something so much bigger than just space and goofy things and stuff, where it does just like we talked about with things they were trying to do with the Prometheus Alien Covenant type things. Here it's just like you're seeing this grand picture of human nature and kind of some of it being flipped on its head, which is what the original Planet of the Apes is kind of doing, kind of looking at how humans act, but through kind of a reverse lens, and then how things like science affects us, or what we consider the science we understand we take as truth and what that means, and things that become religion. If you look at the first Planet of the Apes, it's all about like religion and science and how all those things play into this, and Charlton Heston is kind of despicable really when you think about it. At the beginning he hates humanity really, and it's just kind of a fascinating look. And these ones really look at that through a different lens, because you're following so much more of the ape story, but you're still looking at those ideas of human nature. And I really think that that's really the focus, no matter who you find yourself rooting for, is just kind of looking at those questions through a fantastical lens. So
very true.
But yeah, I mean, but I just think what's most fascinating about these movies is that they're kind of these tentpole blockbusters, and yet they're not bombastic blow up sky beam flying people, all those types of things, stories that we're used to in these blockbusters, but big scale movies telling a small story in a sense, and it's refreshing. I think that some of it was just like, it was refreshing to just be glued to the screen for those types of reasons, whereas like this story is just amazing and pulls me in, and these characters are so fleshed out, and man, that just doesn't happen very often anymore.
Yeah. And
here your fleshed out character is a CGI covered man wearing a leotard. And so it's just kind of fascinating.
It is pretty good that it is very good that a writing team like oh man, I'm drawing a blank. The guys responsible for the first couple Transformers movies and Star Trek weren't behind this, because I feel like
and the Mummy,
this whole thing would have been very predictable. It would have been strictly the humans kind of falling to the mercy of the apes being obviously cold-blooded, war-mongering, just bloodthirsty monsters.
Yeah, you could have easily gone that route.
Yeah. I mean, some people look at the original Planet of the Apes movie not as a sci-fi movie, but as a horror movie. Like, ooh, look what'll happen if we, let society go to fall by the wayside and resort to our animal urges. We'll destroy ourselves, and the beasts will rise up and be our masters, and that sort of thing. But they took, oddly enough, the high road with this whole series, and I heard that they are making a sequel to it, but it's not going to be a direct sequel, so it's going to be interesting where to go from here. I know this movie has gotten a lot of flack from critics,
Really? For the war has?
Yes, but I
wonder what the flack is. I guess I haven't read anything.
essentially what it boils down to, a lot of people doesn't think it lives up to Dawn.
Okay.
Like, it's kind of what happened with The Dark Knight Rises. A lot of people are just saying, "Oh, well, it's too long, and there's just so many plot threads that are not tied up, and just it's honestly just nitpicking."
I don't think they because I kind of came out of it similar, and then I had to think about it for a while, and I think you have to go into it with an attitude of just like, let's just follow the next part of the story and not have so much all right, give me something bigger and better attitude, can kind of change that too a little bit, but because yeah, it's hard. I mean, it's really too soon to say. I mean, it's a phenomenal movie. I really like Dawn too, and apparently it's been 3 years since Dawn, so it hasn't really stood the test of time, but I mean, it's still a rewatchable movie. I mean, I've watched it multiple times, but I guess, yeah, I mean, it's hard to totally put them on a scale, I guess. But that being said, I there's no way to get around the fact that this is a great continuation, and none of the character development they've had thus was damaged through what they did here, and I think on what you were talking about with the writers of this, it's like you had these people who seemed very caring of the original material that they had, and wanted to do it right. They didn't want to just because they could have just gone the route of having like some big,
essentially Michael Bay produced movie.
Yeah, or just have like a Tom Cruise lead who's just like, I will never bow to you, and punches every, and just it could have been a mess. And
at the end of the movie, the apes like, let my people go, in a nod to Charlton Heston.
But that is what's interesting about this. If some of you are afraid to go into this because it's like, oh, it's just some big action spectacle. That's what's interesting. Is they're not at the core action movies.
No,
they're sci-fi. Have that sci-fi adventure slant to them, but are really at the core a dramatic story. and that, I think that's what I'm trying to tell you, and we hope you're seeing here, is that's what makes it so interesting, is you're not just getting like this really flimsy story that's being masked by cool things, but you're getting this really strong 3-movie arc story that also has great special effects on top of that too. And so you have a beautiful house that's built also on a solid foundation. And so that's what's so amazing, refreshing about this movie as compared to some other movies you see, especially in like these summer months where they're just like pooping out a $200 million movie a week. Is just, you don't know what's gonna happen. And this would be a case where anything could have happened. Third movie, I mean, come on, we all know that third movies either don't happen because the second was a flop, or the third movie becomes the movie you wish you could forget. So, that being said, I guess I would just say, if you've never given this Apes trilogy the time of day because you still have bad taste of Tim Burton or think it's going to be campy, like you kind of consider the late 60s or 70s films, just kind of rinse your mouth out of that and just try these fresh, and I think you'll be surprised. I've convinced a handful of people to give these movies a try, and it's people you wouldn't always suspect would like it, and they end up finding a very interesting story. And so we probably oversold it, but that's the way it goes when you find something that's really good. You do have a tendency to get excited and oversell it.
So, on the rating scale, let's go stars today.
Out
What
of
would you-
5? Out of 5, I would probably give this 4.5.
Really, you'd go that strong?
4.5 out of 5, just because, 5 is perfection.
Yeah.
So it's hard to give a 5, but
Yeah, I think I would go about 4 myself. I think. Never mind. I'm supporting myself. I'm going 4.
yeah. And I think the thing I realize is the more I talk about this movie, the more I think about this movie, the more I like it.
Yeah.
And so that's what's really kind of cool about it. And I think it's just part of it too is it's just like there's kind of a drought there of just kind of movies that kind of underwhelmed, and then to have one that just like fulfilled / in some ways went over what you expected was just cool. It was just kind of neat. So so we're definitely saying give these a check. Obviously great cinematic experience, so if you can see it in a movie theater, I would do so. Heck, if you live near a drive-in, this would probably be a fun drive-in movie. I mean, come on, wouldn't it be cool to see like a big ape swinging through trees movie outside like that?
That would be pretty cool.
Just make sure you got good sound, because you want to. This movie is very important to hear. I feel like to hear that music. That music really kind of brings you through the scenes. So just make sure you have good sound, I guess, if you do it at a drive-in. But yeah, definitely check it out, and check us out. We're on things like Facebook and Twitter and YouTube and iTunes and things like that. We'd love it if you haven't subscribed to do that, and just send a comment or recommendation or any of those types of things our way. We're pretty much up to doing anything on our show. So anything that crosses your mind, be like, oh, I can see Steven and Dakota maybe doing or talking about that on their show. Throw it our way. We would definitely consider it, and possibly even do it if it isn't like, I guess, totally out of the question. As long as it's in the realm of talking movies, what we do. So yeah, we encourage you to do that, and just thank you for listening. It's been fun doing this for like over 2 years now. It's kind of crazy to think we've been doing this over 2 years. And so it'll be fun.
Have we made it to the... What episode number are we on?
Oh, jeepers. I don't know.
Oh.
I think we're in the 70s.
Oh. What? We haven't even crossed the 100?
Oh, no. We're not even crossed the 100.
Good Lord.
It'll be cool when we do, because... I don't know. It's just kind of a cool benchmark to hit. Triple digits, man. We'll have to do something special. When we hit episode 100, we'll have to think of something really good to do for that 100th episode.
We'll give our list of our top 100
our
movies.
Top 100 movies. It'll be our top 100 movies. Each of us will have a 100 list. It'll be 100 hours long. It'll take up just an entire 2 terabyte external hard drive to hold that 100-hour episode. Totally worth it. It would be interesting for us to do something maybe we both have pretty decent movie collections. Maybe do something in that realm without it lasting forever. So we'll have to think about that. So if you have any other ideas for us, I guess, to do for our 100th episode, we got some time here. Throw it our way. So, but thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for continuing to listen. And we'll catch you next time. We'll bring some more movies your way, and keep doing some new movies, and probably throw in some old ones that we like. So thanks for listening. This is Steven.
This is Dakota.
See you later.